Historically, America holds those who attack us accountable. Will we again? Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. As the trial of Donald Trump in the United States Senate rolls on, you will be hearing it here on this program, at least, between noon and 3 Eastern Time, 9 and noon Pacific Time. So that's going on. In our second hour today, Ted Harvey is going to drop by. He's got a new organization. It's called the Committee to Defeat the President, specifically Joe Biden. No, Stop Joe is their website. This should be interesting. And in our third hour, Representative Andy Levin is going to be with us. I'm assuming it's pronounced Levin. I haven't met him. He's a Democrat from Michigan, the 9th District, member of the House Committee on Education and Labor, and also the House Foreign Affairs Committee, andylevin.house.gov. And he'll be taking your calls for the full hour. It's a brand new member of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And so we will be doing a national progressive town hall meeting Monday with Representative Levin. But first, I wanted to read to you, or share with you, my op-ed for today that I wrote over at thomhartmann.medium.com. And just tell you in advance, the punchline is the very last sentence. So just follow along with me, okay? The headline, he evaded response, and we can talk about this and how this is all going to play out and the impeachment and pretty much, broadly anything else you'd like. In fact, I want to get into also another way around the filibuster, but we'll get to that in a minute. The headline is, he evaded responsibility far longer than anybody thought possible. The subhead, for justice to prevail, even a chosen one who encouraged attacks on America must be held to account. He lied to his followers for years. He told them he was chosen by God to lead them and that they were the only true believers. Everybody else was okay with abortion, homosexuality, and was weak-kneed about the Bible's call for a vengeance that mandates the death penalty. He reveled, in fact, in his ability to use the death penalty. The right-wing preachers loved him, and he showered them with attention, bending government to shower them with wealth and power. They, in turn, told their congregants that, despite his personal failings, he was the one, the reincarnation, or at least the modern version of an ancient king who Scripture said would come to lead their people into the last days when the Messiah would return. He used race and religion as weapons, promoting scorn and hate against those unlike him and his followers. Intolerance and bigotry bound his acolytes to him. He told his followers that all the politicians were corrupt except those who had pledged loyalty to him, and encouraged them to follow a bizarre cult belief that those political leaders regularly engaged in vile acts of Satan-worshiping and perverted sexual practices. He whipped them up into a frenzy. He used everything from sophisticated online propaganda techniques to old-fashioned rallies to build their loyalty to him, their willingness to fight for him, even for some, their willingness to die for him. He was a tall, vain man who obsessed on his own appearance, demanded absolute loyalty from his third wife, who stood by him as his evil act unfolded, and his children from her and his other wives. He burned through much of his inherited real estate construction fortune, building a small empire devoted to his cult of hero worship of himself, becoming a minor media star and an outspoken advocate for cracking down on crime and criminals. He reveled in being their leader, their chosen one, the unique person who they believed could save their nation, their religion, and their way of life. He never specifically told anybody to attack U.S. landmarks in a way that was explicitly illegal. Instead, he told them they had to fight, they had to be strong, that they were the last chance to save a threatened way of life that flourished mostly in the rural parts of the country. But he left it to others to plan the actual attack. Others who lived far away, who had spent years learning the techniques and technologies of the weapons they would use. Others who actually planned the effort to decapitate the government and its institutions of power with a mighty blow that would shock the world. He surrounded himself with corrupt cronies who drew their authority and power from their close association with him, and helped fill the ranks of the government he had seized at almost every level across the country with people who'd sworn fealty to him. For his followers and true believers, it seemed he was the blessed one, the Midas touch, the man who turned everything into gold. He loved and reached out to the poorly educated, knowing they were the least likely to understand the historic blasphemy he was committing against both their religion and the pro-democracy movement that was sweeping the country. When his followers finally executed the plan they had organized in secret with funding and a wink and a nod from him, whipped into a frenzy by his oratorical skills, he refused to acknowledge responsibility for their horrific act or the people who died as a result of it. In his public statements, he feigned ignorance of the details, although reports leaked out that at the time of the attack, as people were fleeing in terror and dying, he was gleefully watching the entire thing on television from his place of safety. At first, it seemed he would escape any sort of penalty or punishment. Right after his followers pulled off the crime he'd encouraged them to commit, elected Republicans expressed outrage and blamed him by name. Over time, however, their efforts to hold him accountable became more and more feeble, and they eventually changed their mind about prosecuting him altogether. The Republican leader, in fact, said, quote, "I really just don't spend that much time on him, to be honest with you," end quote. It looked, just as with pretty much everything else in his life where he had been irresponsible and destructive, that he would get away with this one, too. After all, he hadn't taken up arms against anybody. He hadn't beaten a policeman or anybody else to death. He hadn't even participated in the planning of the attack. Eventually, however, the task fell to a Democratic politician to bring him down. Osama bin Laden was finally brought to justice by President Barack Obama on May 2nd, 2011. What do you think? Okay, yes, that was all about bin Laden, that whole article. Yes, every piece of it. Oh, my. Okay. The Republican, I don't know if you caught Pat Toomey on Jake Tapper's show over the weekend. Pat Toomey, who back in 2017 said, we need to pass this $1.5 trillion tax cut for billionaires and my donors over Democratic objections. We don't need any friggin' Democrats. Let's pass it by reconciliation, which is what they did. Pat Toomey, who was like a spokesman for that, was on TV saying, not only should we not pass the $1.9 trillion emergency COVID relief package, not only should we not pass it, we shouldn't even pass the $600 billion Republican compromise that Susan Collins and friends offered. We shouldn't give Americans anything. Now, Toomey was whining about the budget and the deficit and inflation, but what's really going on here, and I'm just astonished that nobody in the media is saying this out loud, and I'm astonished that more Democrats aren't screaming this from the rooftops, because if the tables were turned, the Republicans would be. What's really going on here is that the Republicans are saying, we don't want the Democrats to pass a relief package that will put Americans back to work and get the economy going again, because then Democrats will win in the 2022 midterm elections. And a Democrat might even, Kamala Harris might even hold the presidency in 2024. No, we've got to cripple Joe Biden. We've got to cripple the economy. This was their mantra in 2009 when Obama proposed a $2 trillion bailout for the economy, and they got him to whittle it down to $900 billion. One-third of it, $300 billion, just being tax cuts. Only $600 billion in stimulus in 2009 to recover from the damage that George W. Bush had wreaked on this country. And then for the next 8 years, they complained about how slow the recovery was. Remember that? The Republican Party is demanding that Joe Biden shoot Santa Claus. Thank God, so far, most Democrats aren't listening, although this idea of means testing it to $50,000 or less